We're here for another episode of Pressure Point. Really excited to have Zameer Ahmed here from Adcorp. We're going to talk all things digital transformation, which I know is a topic that's of interest to all of our listeners out there. So really excited for this conversation. So with that, Zameer, thanks for coming. Great to have you here. Let's start with a bit of your background. Tell us how you got to where you are, and then we'll move forward from there.
No, great stuff. Thank you. I think firstly, thank you for having me. My technology background is actually quite a story, to be honest with you. I first wanted to be a physio in school, and then I read the bio textbook and realized this wasn't for me. So in secondary school, I started with computers, and I think I just enjoyed it. This is coding, having fun, enjoying itself at this year. And then university, I found probably my niche in terms of having the element where you could talk to humans on the business side and talk to technology on the IT side. And that's where it started. And once I got into the working world, when you can see the value it can create, it's just picked up from there that we can really maximize technology to make our lives easier. And I am a lazy person, so making my life easier is all what I do.
Yeah, so something which, I always like to say is that, well, what's a return on your efforts, right? I think what someone, smart once said to me is that the only finite resource out there is time.
Yeah.
So how can you maximize your return on time?
Yes, and I agree with you. And that's my narrative to my team, who's the most laziest in the team, and let's see who can do it.
Yeah, look, it's a good challenge and the rewards there. So it sounds like you're in the perfect place at Adcorp, where you kind of marrying your passion for technology with a passion for people.
Yes.
And I guess navigating that, the journey towards digital transformation is not always an easy one. I think for a lot of people, change is not something that comes naturally. It's easier to stick with the status quo or do things in the way you've always done them. But to your point, technology introduces efficiencies that were not possible without the technology.
Yeah.
So how do you prepare people for that change?
I think firstly we need to acknowledge that change is hard, like you said, and understand what is the root cause behind that kind of resistance that people might have to change. And I think often what we find is that when people feel there's technology coming in, they're concerned about their jobs. And what we try to focus on in the technology kind of transformations that we do is more the opportunity, using technology from an opportunity perspective. I like to make the kind of correlation to the Industrial Revolution. When the machines came in, people were also scared. There's something coming in here that's going to take my job. And it's the same thing with technology. There's something coming in that's going to take my job. But what we've learned from that is that there's other jobs that are being created. There's other opportunities that are being created. And that's the thing we try to focus on in the transformation journey we've been through, is that, yes, we are bringing in technology to create efficiency, to add more value, to make your life easier, not to keep you lazy, but to make you more efficient. But how do we leverage you in that way? And that's probably the biggest focus around creating the opportunity, to say, what more can you do? If you think about it, if this task is automated as an example, okay, now you've got X amount of time free. What can you do with that time? And that's been probably our success in driving a very big technology revolution at Adcorp. We've changed multiple systems from an operational to a human capital management to a finance stuff. But the value creation has probably been the biggest thing we do there. Not without difficulties. I think we need to be realistic around that there. But the anxiety around people not sure about what their roles are in the future is probably the biggest focus we've had around how do we reskill you for how we see you being maximized.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot there that I want to get into. But maybe the starting point is, when you look at an organization, how do you take stock of what skills exist? And then what skills people need, and is there a gap between the two? Let's maybe start there.
I think that's probably the biggest question most companies are asking themselves now, but you need to actually take a step back, to be honest with you, and you need to understand where are you going. Unfortunately, what you find in many organizations is digital transformation is like a sexy jargon. We need to put a system in place, and our competitors are doing it, everyone is doing it. And yes, you'll find the value in there, but if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to understand the skills gap. You're not going to know what you need. So for me, the first point would be is understanding where you're headed. Once you understand where you're headed, then you can do that assessment. Then you can say, okay, who do I have currently in my team? What skills do they have? You do a skills assessment around that there. And then you say, where do we want to go? So what are the skills that are maybe lacking? And then you ask the question about, Do you buy the skill in the market, or is it something where you reskill your employees? And I think the bigger trend for me is to reskill your employees, upskill them on new technologies. The IP is something you can never buy out there, So the starting point for me around any digital transformation and understanding the skills gap that you might have is, where do you want to go? What's the gap? Upskill and reskill your employees. And then as your roadmap kind of evolves in there, you can understand that you need to bring in additional skills out there. But knowing where you're going is probably the starting point around all of it.
Yeah, so I think it's that big picture to keep that in mind. So maybe just practically, how do you go about these skills assessments for staff? I mean, how do you know what skills you need to be assessing your employees against?
Look, ultimately, it's about the work that needs to be done. I think when you implement digital transformation, what you used to do before is you're not going to do it now. So that expectation, that clarity around, I'm creating this efficiency, I'm creating this value in the process, but now that means that free time that you have, you're going to do A, B, and C. So when you look at the job profiles, when you look at the competencies that you have in your environment, that's probably the starting point, is reflecting on that and say, what has changed? And in that change, you're then able to assess that previously we expected employee A, as an example, to be able to do one or two things. Now we're expecting more out of that. And that's where our workplace skills plan, if you want to call it that way, needs to be around personal development. And that's probably the starting point around it. There's obviously tools that you get, skills assessment frameworks. You can get, the people to go online and do some assessments, partner with some companies in there. But what I found probably most valuable is taking the technology partner that you have and using them as your initial kind of hand-holding, once you implement new solutions, to say, how do I kind of upskill my people to get there? But knowing what they're going to do probably answers the question best around what skills you need to improve on.
Yeah, that makes loads of sense. I think maybe just to make this as practical as possible for people tuning in, how do you manage it though? Because I mean, you're still a business, right? You can't push pause, right, and take staff out of their day-to-day so they can just focus on learning new skills. So how do you do, these different things? How do you do the skills assessments? How do you upskill? And how do you ensure that, the work still gets done all at the same time?
Yeah. Probably the most important thing that you need to do is not start the day you go live. You don't do digital transformation where you say, okay, guys, new system is coming in on the 1st of December. Everyone get used to it. You need to start this journey the day you start the project, is doing that involvement of the employees being part of the design of the system, part of the testing of the system. Because as you go through those functions, you already started creating the change for one, because remember that anxiety is something that you need to address. So even in mapping out a skills program and saying, this is how we're going to upskill you, if you don't get past the anxiety and the fear the employees have, you're going to get resistance to this training.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the appetite and support for it. You're going to schedule the training, you're going to create online assessments and do all of it there, but you're going to have a disengaged employee. And it's probably the biggest thing we need to manage in a digital transformation, is taking the employee on the journey from the start and saying, this is what we're going to do, this is where we're going to go with this here. And now in order to get you into performing in a different role or working at another level, this is the skills training we're going to provide you in there. So for me, I think that the journey starts early in the process, defining exactly, and that's why earlier on in the conversation I said you need to know where you want to go. And those points of need to know where you want to go and need to know the skills gap assessment in there, when you combine those points, you map it in parallel with the project. Because the digital transformation is massive. Whether it's a one system solution or multiple system solution, it's absolutely massive for the organization, because you invested a lot of money into the solution and you're putting a lot of eggs into their basket to say this value is going to be created. But it's massive for the employees who maybe for 20 years, 10 years, they've been working in a certain way, certain process, a certain style. And now you're fundamentally shifting that. So you've got your new employees who might say, this is not so bad, but you got your core existing employees, the heartbeat of the company that have been there for so long. It's uncomfortable. And you need to address that uncomfortability as early on in the process and not leave it too late. Often what I find in some of the initiatives I've been exposed to is that training is at the end of the project. It's like they've gone, the companies have gone through all the phases, design phase, happy with testing. And now when the project team is happy with the testing, the project team is happy with the implementation, they then say, employees, come. See, let me train you on the system. And already you have it disconnected. So for me, the practical element of it is starting early and getting people involved early. getting their insights, getting their feedback, so that the change already starts with them earlier. And then in their process, as they're part of it, you're able to identify the gaps and start putting training programs in place earlier.
Yes, I think it's really important. And I think, again, obvious when you say it, right? But I think often overlooked. How do you take employees on the journey with you and ensure that they're part of that journey on day one? So it's not implementation day, as you've said, and it's a big surprise, and all of a sudden there is a resistance to that change at that point. Maybe just to touch on, what are some success stories that you've had around both, I guess, individuals who maybe, to your point, had been in the organization for a long time and thought, they would never get their head around these new skills. And then maybe from an organizational perspective around how you've created efficiency. So let's start first with individual success stories, if you can share.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I think one of the success stories, the lady actually works in my team now. Worked in the HR administration function, very much paper orientated. Here's the contracts, here's the files, this is what we need to do. And post implementing the solution that we had from a human capital management system, she saw the value, saw the efficiency that was created in there. All of a sudden, you're not sitting here and, going to cumbersome documents that are just on a system, is automated, is ease of use, approvals are in place. So much so that she actually wanted to come and work in the technology space because she saw the value creation that came out of it and said, basically, with my knowledge and skills that I have working in this environment, if I come and work on the technology side, I can help people who have been in my position even more, and that is the opportunity that I was referring to earlier on, that, automation is being created, efficiency is being created, and the perception a lot of people have is that my job is at risk, or, I don't know what I'm going to do in the future. But here we have an implementation of technology. They created an opportunity for somebody who maybe might never have worked in technology if they never went through the stuff. And that was inspiring for me to say that, sometimes you try and carve out what things might look like, but there's another hand creating some exciting things. And that was quite impressive. And I won't lie to you, from my side, the performance is excellent. It's somebody's got the passion for it because they understand the value, so you're connected with the employee on a different level. And for me, that's definitely a success story that shows how technology implementation can just change somebody's mindset. So definitely one for me. From an organizational perspective, I think we had one organization where we implemented a solution where the previous system was so chaotic that there was one employee spending the first 2 weeks of every month just dealing with leave queries, because the data management is just so complex. Since implementing the solution, no queries anymore. Believe it, and I'm not exaggerating. I promise there's no queries anymore. If there is a query, it's resolved very quickly. But it helped the company from a financial perspective, because remember, leave liability is a big cost to a company. And now by having to be able to proactively manage people's leave, building the right rules, from 90 leave rules in the company, it's gone down to 2 leave rules because they got a technology system that can support the kind of innovation they want to do. And we've seen about a 20 million rand reduction in leave liability.
Wow, that's amazing.
And that's that I've got proof and I got documents and I got everything for that there. I promise you that there. But it's given 2 weeks back to somebody. What can you do now with an employee who's got 2 weeks back? Just explore the opportunities around that there, and that's where my kind of passion for technology comes in. Is that there's a clean example for you. Somebody who administratively going through people querying leave. How do I look at this here? And leave is a very sensitive topic for employees. Now that person's got 2 weeks back. You can do so much. The employee even more so is happy because they're not concerned about, hey, I captured my leave or I didn't capture my leave. What's happening in there? So I think those 2 points really stand out for me because it shows the true value of technology and the true value of embracing technology. And when you trust in it, because the trust is there now, you don't have to deal with things that currently make a noise in the system or previously made a noise in the system. Now you focus on the transformational stuff. You focus on the work that's going to make your life better for the operations team, make your life better for any team in the environment that you're implementing the solutions.
Yeah, look, I think there's so much there. I think the first point I just want to stress that you've been making is this point around moving people's day-to-day away from low impact, high admin roles to high impact initiatives, right? Like let's focus our time on high impact initiatives. I think the next, and I think they're often overlooked, but so important, and you've touched on both, is just technology introducing transparency into a system and technology introducing data into a system to allow for measuring your ROI and, improved analytics. So there are these other benefits that come in addition to, the time saved within the business around transparency and improved analytics and measurability. So maybe, anything that you want to add around measurability, how you use the technology from an analytics perspective to drive decision making, to look at ROI?
I think speed, probably the most important thing, and trust. If you in a company, JSE listed company like I work in, or any organization, doesn't really matter. You want to be able to make decisions fast, but you want to be able to have information there at the click of a button. And when you work on the old, probably previously the best system in the world was Excel. I think everybody, learned Excel and made their own systems and, did their own things in that way. Now you're no longer required to, pool data of different sources and put it together. In the environment I'm currently working at, a 5-day work week, in terms of creating dashboards, is now a 1-hour thing because the system is trusted. The data is in there. You pull it through. It means Exco level members are sitting with data at hand, having key conversations around using data they can trust, not data that's manipulated by humans to kind of fit in a format that, suits everyone so you can read it. It's already built in through the main source of data. So I think the speed of getting important data to manage your business is probably the biggest thing for me. And most importantly is the fact that there's one source of the truth. You've had how many occasions, I'm sure everyone can think about a time where you sit in a meeting and then, you say one thing and somebody else says a different thing on the same piece of data because you're using multiple versions of the truth. And when you can create trust in the data, you just can create confidence in decision making that you make. And that for me probably speaks the biggest volume about, a good digital transformation project where people can sit in boardrooms and sit in meetings and trust the data that they have in hand.
Yeah, I think a really important point there is around, that data allowing for a culture of experimentation, because for the first time you can try something, pause, assess results, and then try something else and compare. So are you using the technology in those ways to kind of understand and continuously iterate on a solution, or is it implementation and then go? How do you think about that?
Look, in the journeys I've been through, I think it's different cycles that you have. Initially, especially when you do a go live, you don't want to be changing too much because remember, you're still dealing with the employee. So when you do that and the culture isn't being created in an organization, and you create more uncertainty. Because why was it first like this, and in a couple of months down the line you're changing that thing. So I think the maturity level of the organization probably depends on how you leverage the technology. We're about 3 years, I say 3 years into our journey. So now we're at that point where we're able to do that. So there's a lot of things from a human capital management perspective, as an example, where our policies might have 3 approvers. But because we've now built trust in the system, we've got the understanding that, we can use this. We're now removing more approvals. We kind of removing the red tape, for lack of a better word, in HR, compliance, policies, everything else to assure. But we've got the backing of the auditors because they trust the system. We've got the backing of our compliance and risk because they trust the system. So I think we at that point now where we can start that journey, and we've run 1 or 2 initiatives as yet. But it's not something that I would advocate to do it too early in the process. I think you need to be cognizant of how the broader kind of impact is on people. But at a certain level, if you can kind of isolate it in terms of certain functions, you can kind of do that and try new initiatives and then change it. We are there now, and I think it's a learning for us because again, it's another change, and how do you manage that there? But I think I'm quite confident that based on what we've already built and we've entrenched it, so we've had a good 3-4 years to kind of entrench this kind of digital transformation we've gone through, that we will see success in the next few months.
I trust the system.
Yeah, trust.
So something which I want to speak about now more from a personal perspective, and we'll go back to the organization, is that technology is changing so quickly, right? It's not, I think, a common theme and a common thread in what you're saying is that it's constant, right? It's not something which is done and then it's done, it's ongoing, right? So firstly, just from a personal perspective, how do you stay up to date with, what the latest trends are, what the latest technologies are, because of the speed of change at the moment?
Look, I think for me, and you need to understand the type of person I am. I'm not a big reader, so I'm into more bite-sized information. So I follow a lot of influencers that, like your Elon Musk is an example, just to kind of keep abreast of what it is. But I think if you go to different social media platforms, there's a lot of, on the open AI, I mean, there's been some interesting things happening on open AI over the last couple of weeks. So I keep abreast that way there. And then I've got
efficient.
Yeah, my dad always said I should read more, and now I can understand why he said that. But at a moment in time, I use that as a point of reference. And then what piques my interest, I go and research more in that way. I think there's a lot of information out there, so it's how you use it. But I also try and attend conferences. I think in South Africa there's a kind of few events, tech fest that are happening in there, just to kind of keep connected in there. And we've got a lot of good thought leaders as well that kind of open you up in there. It's also a very it's a gray world, because there's so much happening. Like you're not sure which way it's going and how you're going. So by understanding, and I go back to the point I made earlier on about knowing where you want to go, you need to keep yourself grounded to that. So as much as getting this knowledge and skills, so that's what I do from my side, is that I've got a roadmap. I don't know what I'm trying to achieve, but I'm aware, obviously, it needs to be flexible. The roadmap can't be kind of concrete and cast in stone. This is what you're going to do for the next 12 months or 18 months. It has to pivot based on the changes in the market. But at the same point in time, you need to be able to iron out, what new information or what advancements are applicable to you or not. And I think we also need to be honest with ourselves that, South Africa, we're not going to be the ones that are going to be first advocates of any new solution. We're probably going to, we are behind the curve slightly, see what other countries or other organizations do first, and then we start implementing. But at the same point in time, it's not to say that we shouldn't be the advocates of it, but it's just depending on where you are in your journey and how you're going about doing it. So I think for me, the confidence that I'm building in my environment currently is that because we've embedded this digital transformation now for a good few years, we can now leverage the nuances that are coming through in the industry. Obviously, AI is probably one of the biggest things that are coming through. A lot of compliance things around that there. So, very, very complicated world, as much as it's easy for us to kind of leverage on an individual level. So I use ChatGPT, not for articles and for blogs, but just to, kind of expand my knowledge a bit more. But I think just the snippets of information in the first, it's too much to read, too much.
No, there's a lot. I guess just to your point, you're going to focus on what's relevant, cut out some of the noise, and be efficient in your consumption of all that information. So just one point that you made, which I think it's an important lesson or an important approach for people to emulate, is your point around you can have your roadmap, and at a point in time you make a decision or you plan based on the information that you have today. But in a week's time, in 6 months' time, if there's new information that you now have available, or you have access to that you didn't have up front, you're not stuck on that same road. And I think people get stuck on that same road. They don't adapt to new information and use that to course correct. So, I mean, how do you do that? I mean, it's not always easy. If you've said, okay, well, this is where we're going, and now all of a sudden there is this big change from a technology perspective, and you've got to course correct. How do you take that in your stride? On a personal level and also on an organizational level?
Look, I think it's about getting everyone on board. Technology, digital transformation is not a once-off event. I think we've spoken about it earlier on. So if you accept it and are aware of it and you acknowledge it, if the culture in the organization is cognizant that we've started a digital transformation journey, but there's no start and end. So if you've got that kind of alignment and understanding at the right levels in the organization, then you're going to have the support for it. If you don't have it, then you're going to have the pushback. Because the reality of it is that technology does require investment. So you're going to get a few naysayers, you're going to get some pushback, or what might the board say, or what might, someone at a higher level in the organization say. But if you can show the value creation around what you're trying to do and why the pivot or why the need for change is there, because you've got your North Star, right? You've created the way we want to go. And now all you're doing is you're saying that the tools or the equipment that are out there have shifted, and there's something better that might take us 2 levels ahead of where we wanted to go, because that's what life is about now. I mean, AI the way we understood it probably 3 years ago to the way we understand it now. It's much more involved in the world as we are. So if that change is happening in 3 years, imagine what's going to happen in the next 2 years. And it's just going to get, the rate of change in technology is just going to get faster and faster. So I think the company culture, in all honesty, is very important. It's never an individual thing. I can have my own mindset. I can see from an individual perspective, I love technology, I embrace technology, but if I don't have the right environment to kind of operate in and be successful in, it's never going to work. I can shout as loud as I want to, but having those stakeholders that, are informed in key decisions, aligned to the vision, aligned to the roadmap, aligned to digital transformation is an ongoing kind of event. Then you're going to get the support that you need.
I think that culture point is so important, right? And in some ways, I think the hardest skills, more technical skills are probably easier to teach.
Yeah.
The softer skills, getting the culture in the organization right, more of a challenge. And you've spoken to, guidance around that from an alignment perspective, taking individuals on the journey, to be part of it versus kind of be recipients of the change. But maybe just on an individual level, is there anything that you do within the organization to prepare people for those softer skills, to help them build resilience or adapt to change? Do you have programs like that for staff or things that you're trying to encourage individuals to do in their personal capacity?
No, definitely. I think the soft skills, I firmly believe it's, maybe the word more important is not the right word, but the importance of soft skills is probably more important now than it's ever been. I think the way the world has shifted, especially since COVID, with the remote working and the way we operate nowadays, is having those skills with technology coming in. Technology will never have that skill. Technology can't be empathetic. It doesn't have the emotional intelligence. Maybe 50 years time, some technology will tell me, look at this interview, this guy is like, what did he say? We can be empathetic. But in the short term, I don't think it can be empathetic. So as a human, on the human element side of it, those are the skills that we need, because in a world where technology is going to probably be so influential in how we work, the softer skills is going to have to be picked up by us from a human-centric approach. And we definitely are looking at programs in our organization around that. I think resilience with digital transformation is probably a big component of it. If you're going to have the rate of change, I think COVID from a South Africa perspective just, kind of accelerated the change that we're experiencing here. I think if there wasn't a COVID, in my view, a hybrid work or remote work would have been now only coming in, but it came in much faster. So you need to be resilient. You need to, what we experienced here was quite hard, but the organizational transformation, the resiliency is there, the emotional intelligence, the empathy, the communication. We use technology so much to talk now that we forget to talk to each other, and knowing the cues from an interpersonal kind of relationship is there. So that's something that we definitely focus from an organizational perspective, to say how do we kind of empower our employees with the right tools to kind of be efficient. You're creating this transformation, but you need to give the people that are now going to leverage these tools the right skills to kind of leverage it. So when we talk about skills in our organization, I think we are making a shift, gradually towards more soft skills than hard skills. The hard skills you're going to need, but I think it's something you can probably learn, easier than learning a soft skill. You don't learn emotional intelligence, overnight by reading a textbook. You have to experience it and kind of go through that there. So as part of our skills plan, the soft skills is definitely a drive.
Makes a lot of sense. I think, someone kind of explained it in the context of a doctor, right? And I think, what AI will assist doctors in doing is on the diagnosis side, right? And more time connecting as a human with their patients, right? More time focused on care. And I think we can take that and apply that to an organization. Maybe, in closing and, hearing you, I think it sounds like the biggest skill, the biggest need out there for employees is them acknowledging that the only constant is change and being able to adapt to that change. And having that, mindset that anything, is possible and I can learn these new things. And probably the biggest thing for people is to do it once, right? Once they've done it once, they know that they can do it again, but you got to get them over the line that first time. And it sounds like your organization's 3 years into this, you've done that. And hopefully, from your experience, it becomes easier over time. Do you feel that it does, that once employees do it for the first time, it becomes easier to trust in the system thereafter?
I think embracing the change is probably a difficult thing from an employee perspective, but like you said, you have to take that leap of faith that, it's coming in from an organizational perspective. There is a reason, behind why things are being done, and understanding that reason is important. I think it's the organization's responsibility to make sure that, you give the employee those tools to understand it. But once you've embraced the change, once you can see the value, like how I've outlined of the success stories we've had in our organization, then the next change becomes easier because you can understand the vision, you can understand where we're going to, what's the roadmap, what's the point of it. And sometimes people ask that simple question, what's the point? Okay, you're bringing a new technology, but what's the point? No, you were doing it fine before. There was no issue before. So why you want to change that? And I think once you experience a successful digital transformation, because we've seen in the news recently, there's some companies that have had some difficult transformations, you then are more open to, future kind of enhancements and transformation in there. So I think we've had a conversation today that, shows a lot of what we require, but I'm not unaware that there's been some massive failures that have happened out there. But even in that, there's still the resilience component that come back, and the fact that you embrace, okay, what does this now mean for us? How do we now do this here? So I think opening up your mind to, from a growth mindset perspective, if you want to maybe coin that way, what is the opportunity in this? And maybe bringing it down to individual level. For me as an individual, okay, there's something happening in the organization. They're trying to create more value, more efficiencies. There's the reason behind this. How can I maximize this opportunity for myself? And looking at the glass half full in this regard, or looking at this as an opportunity for you rather than a hindrance, might just be the way to go with all the technology changes we're going through.
Yeah, well, I love that. And I think you raise an important point in closing, just that you're not going to get it right all the time. Yeah. And I think you've got to be patient with yourself. You've got to be patient with the organization, that mistakes will happen, right? But if you don't try new things, you're never going to move forward. Yeah. So I think that's really powerful and important to keep in mind. Yeah. But Zameer, thanks so much. And I love the conversation. I'm sure everyone listening has learned a lot. I think the biggest thing for me is just that mindset, right? Being open to change, being willing to try new things, and being okay with the discomfort that comes with it, but also important for leaders to empower their teams and not just try and implement change, but take the organization with them along that journey. So with that, thanks so much. Thanks for listening. And thanks again to Zameer.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you.